The LA County Probation Department is facing some serious problems, including violence among detainees, officers charged with child abuse, and the excess use of pepper spray on several teens. Now, a new report shows just how dangerous and dysfunctional the county's youth detention operation has become. LA Times' Matt Stiles has written about the department and this particular case and is here to tell us more about it. Matt, do us a favor, remind us how many kids are underneath the supervision of the department.
The department oversees about 7,000 kids who've been charged with various crimes in juvenile court, and of them about 850 are actually housed in detention facilities, juvenile halls, and these rehabilitation camps.
And so in March, there was an uptick in violence. Tell us how many incidents there were and what that involved.
Well, we've seen an uptick in violence in recent years, actually. Violence among youth on youth violence is up. Violence against the staff by youth is up, and in March we saw some pretty high numbers, and they continue despite all the efforts of the management to try to improve the quality of the care in the facilities.
There were 88 youth-on-youth incidences of violence in March, and in that same month, 46 attacks on staff. The staff are scared to go to work, right?
They are. I mean, it depends on which staff you talk to. There's kind of a generational divide. Some of the staff are afraid to go to work or are not happy about their situation at work. Maybe afraid is the wrong word, because they are worried about getting in trouble for disciplining a youth or doing something wrong and not being supported by the management. There are other staff who are worried about being assaulted, who do complain about the working conditions.
And this is happening at the Sylmar facility, but it's not the only one. At Camp Rocky in the San Gabriel Mountains, there were 2 fights that required backup and medical attention. And even when someone's leaving court, there was a female detainee in Compton who got violent leaving the courthouse, right?
Right, and I put those stories in there as examples of the types of things rather than the sort of aggregate statistics.
Tell people what she did.
Right, but she was being let out, was very uncooperative. They put a guard over her face so that she would stop spitting. She pulled that off, kept spitting, and when the officer tried to protect herself with her hand, the youth reached out and bit her hand.
Now, in the last few years, pepper spray use went up 154% between 2015 and 2017 because the guards do not want to risk the physical altercation, mainly because they don't want to hurt a youth or they don't want to be disciplined for touching a youth. But then 6 officers were charged with child abuse and assault, right?
From the charges, it appears as though there was a sort of reckless or excessive use of pepper spray, and unnecessary use of pepper spray.
And they didn't let them wash their eyes.
And so then some of them were charged with a lesser crime. It was more of injury to a child for not letting them decontaminate, which can be very painful.
Joe Gardner, who's the president of the Probation Commission, which is the volunteer advisory panel, wrote a 3-page letter to the Board of Supervisors. What did it say?
It basically recounted one officer's tale. She was so desperate that she reached out to him directly using her name and listed a bunch of things that she thought were wrong with her facility. It was so bad that when he read it, he went to the facility and was allowed to go inside and meet with her, and she gave him a tour, and he saw all these conditions that we later were given access to and published. The broken windows, the graffiti, just the tiles ripped from the ceiling. And his takeaway from it was the staff was overwhelmed, the staff morale was very low, and that the youth were maybe not being supervised in certain instances. Clearly, they were allowed to have enough time to write a wall full of graffiti of the marker. And so he was very concerned about what he saw and wrote the letter and sent it to the supervisors.
And now the State Department of Justice is getting involved, right?
They are. They had been, given the reports about pepper spray, they had been talking to the county and the department about conditions and about what was going on with pepper spray, why was it increasing so much. And then the story that came out and the revelations that were produced by Gardner prompted them to make a visit.
I do think it's worth noting that 90% of these kids have open mental health cases, right? And that's a big consideration here. The department is hoping to move to more therapeutic models. They brought in some of the Chargers football team, and they're hoping that going forward, they'll be able to do more of that sort of therapy and sort of positive reinforcement. Do you think that's possible, and will it work?
It's difficult. It depends on who you ask. The management's committed to trying that. The Board of Supervisors is committed starting to try that. There are all kinds of community organizations and advocacy groups that believe you can get away from an incarceration model, one in which the kids are supported and given programs and training and mental health treatment. But you're right, the kids that are in there now are the ones that have the most difficult cases, the ones that have had trauma in their lives, that have that suffer from disorders, that act out in some ways they can't help their behavior, and it makes it very difficult for these officers to take care of them, in these halls. It's a really tough situation. I wouldn't want to be the department director trying to figure out how to reform this department.
And just a final note, in addition to phasing out pepper spray, there's going to be a new civilian oversight panel, which is supposedly going to complete a reform plan and submit that. Is there anything that needs to be on that plan that sounds like a good idea to you that you've heard from the officers or from the mental health experts?
So the department has been through this cycle of scandal, reform, and some of those reforms have actually had an adverse impact on the department over the years. They used to have solitary confinement for kids who got angry. They took that away, and so that led to the pepper spray increase because they had to be confronted with these kids all the time. What will be interesting to see is will this group that's doing this reform plan go through all of those past recommendations that haven't been implemented and put together a coherent policy for reforming, and will they constitute this oversight panel in a way that it can do robust, regular oversight, things like subpoena power, and more of an investigative type of panel than an advisory one in which we have now.
All right. Thank you so much, Matt. And Matt will continue to follow this story, and you can read all about it at latimes.com.